Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville, 105.3 online, ESPNEvansville.com. 2015 NFL Draft is in the books. The Colts got off to an odd start, let's put it that way. And we'll bring in Kyle Rodriguez, ColtsAuthority.com's managing editor, get his thoughts on how the rest of that Colts draft went. Kyle, thanks for the time. I won't put words in your mouth, but from what I watched on Twitter Thursday night, after they made that pick at number 29 for Philip Dorsett, I won't say that you were upset, but you, I think, were along the lines with me as just kind of confused as to why that position at that point. Are you still in that mindset? Are you still confused by it? Because I kind of am.
I was definitely confused early on, and definitely just shocked, and kind of in that state of wait, what just happened?
Bad words came out of my mouth.
Everything. A few minutes. Go ahead.
No, I said bad words came out of my mouth. All kinds of stuff happened.
I got word a few minutes before the pick was announced, and I thought it was a joke. Because that was, wide receiver for one. Wide receiver was not a position that anybody expected, obviously, in the first round. And Dorsett is a guy who a lot of people had second or third round grades on early on, and he, as the process went on, he kind of rose. Just not expecting that at all. But I do think, as we've heard from the Colts after the draft, it's kind of become a little bit more clear picture. It sounds like they had Dorsett rated among the top 20 prospects in this draft, and so a lot of the defensive guys that a lot of the media and fans were kind of pinpointing at that spot, they had with second round grades. And Gregson is a former scout. He's a BPA guy, the best player available, and that's what they did with Dorsett. And although my draft pick evaluation or whatever, when I was looking at players, I wouldn't have had Dorsett as a top 20 player in this draft. But if that's their philosophy and that's where they had him graded, I can't fault them too much for that. We a lot of times when we look at the draft, we have to look at it from a need. Like we look at these post-draft grades and we look at what we think they should draft when we look before the draft. We're just looking at what they need, and that's how we want them to draft. But really, the NFL draft, when we look back on past drafts, it's not about whether they needed that or which position they needed. It's all about how the players turned out and who came out and ended up being impact players, who ended up busting and not being in the league for more than a year or two. So if Dorsett comes out and he becomes an impact player for a long time, nobody's going to care that they picked a receiver in the first round of this draft.
Well, and I said that too. I even said on Friday, I said, look, I'm not real thrilled with the pick. I think they should have went defense like I think a lot of people thought they should have. I would have been perfectly okay with Malcolm Brown there at number 29 instead of the Patriots getting him, but it is what it is, and that's why we have radio shows and you have a website, and they actually get paid to scout these guys. But should we look at this as any indication that they don't maybe feel like they're going to be able to keep T.Y. Hilton long-term, or are we looking too deep into it?
That was the reaction from a lot of people, and a lot of people said, okay, well, maybe it makes a little bit more sense that way. But I think even then, I don't really think, from what it sounds like, they said specifically, Gregson and Pagano during their post-first-round press conference, that this had nothing to do with T.Y. Hilton. He was just the best player left on their board. Now, I do think this does give them a little bit more leverage over Hilton when it comes to his contract negotiations coming up. They don't necessarily have to, if he has a really good year this year and he's demanding an elite kind of contract, they don't necessarily have to give in to those kind of demands because they have a guy that's very similar in the wings, and especially if someone like Moncrief develops as well, they have some options. They don't necessarily have to splurge. But I do think that Hilton is in their long-term plans, and I think they want to keep T.Y. Hilton around. Hilton has become a core part of the team, obviously, the last few years. He's become one of the guys who kind of is one of the faces of the team, a young guy who's developed really well. And I think Ryan Gregson especially, with Hilton being one of his first early on really big wins when it comes to the draft, I think they're going to want to keep him around. But I do think, like I said, it gives them a little bit more leverage potentially in those contract negotiations next offseason.
Talking to Kyle Rodriguez, ColtsAuthority.com, also a featured columnist for Bleacher Report. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. Any concern on your side, Kyle, that they didn't address offensive line until the last pick of this thing with that compensatory selection there at number 255 overall?
If I have any qualms about this draft, really, it would be that. And it's hard because the Colts came into this draft with so many needs across the board. There was no way they were going to be able to fill them all, in exactly the way that you wanted. And in this case, offensive line happened to be the one that got shafted a little bit. The offensive line, what they really needed was a future plan at offensive tackle. With Costanzo's contract coming up, with Gosder Chillis' injury issues, and no real backup tackles on the roster. They have some guards that can slide over and play tackle, but not necessarily, really top-notch tackles that they can fill in for the future. So, if they were going to go with offensive linemen early on, I really wanted to see them take a tackle to kind of plan for that future. And they are in a little bit of a rut there now. If there's any injuries to Costanzo especially, but if Chirlis continues, if his injuries continue to nag on, they could be, in a little bit of a tough spot. They do have some versatility that can fill in. But they will be needing now, because they weren't able to find one, they will be needing to look for an offensive tackle in the future, especially next offseason. I think that's going to be a big priority.
Some of these guys that they drafted, the DeJohn Smith, the Henry Andersons, some of these guys in the earlier parts, are these guys that can come in and make an impact right away, or are these guys that we may not really see their full potential until next season or even later on down the road?
I don't think you're going to get anybody from this draft that's going to start from day one. I think you could definitely potentially see a guy like Anderson or Smith or even Geathers in the fourth round potentially come in and maybe start near the end of the season if there's some injuries and whatnot. And I think a guy like Anderson will definitely make an impact in that defensive line rotation. He's a pass rusher that really had a great season in 2014, and that Colts defensive line, everybody knows, could definitely use some pass rushing ability. Smith, I think you're going to see more of that impact next year with Toller's contract being up. But I think he'll be an upgrade over Josh Gordy as a dime corner and potentially can slide in case of injury. So, yeah, this was a draft more so for depth, especially on that defensive side of the ball and future building for the future. So I think we're going to see the real impact of this draft be a year or two down the road. And really that's how most drafts work, especially when you're drafting it at 29 and later. So that was kind of to be expected.
Who is outside of Dorsett, obviously your first-round pick better be your best pick, but who do you see in the draft outside of the first pick being the best pick of the draft for the Colts?
I think Anderson is kind of their best value that they were able to find for him. He was a guy that a lot of people said maybe could potentially rise into the bottom half of the first round or early second round with all the production he had during the year. He was good against the run. He was good against the pass. I think getting him at the bottom of the third round was a really good value and a guy that could potentially be that pass rushing presence that the defensive line needs. And I think Josh Robinson, the running back they got in the sixth round, could be a really good value as well. He's a guy that he doesn't go down. You watch him in college, and he was a power runner. He made so many people miss tackles. And he's a guy who could definitely come in and obviously stay behind Frank Gore in that first year or two, but potentially take on more of a lead role. He'll probably always be kind of a committee back because he's smaller at 5'8", but I do think he can be a guy who can contribute right away and add a little bit of something to that Colts running back group.
Talking to Kyle Rodriguez, ColtsAuthority.com. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 online, ESPNEvansville.com. It seems there's something about Stanford that they really like, with obviously number 12. They brought in Pep Hamilton, Henry Anderson. What do you know about David Perry, the nose tackle they got there in round 5?
I think he's definitely a guy who can challenge Josh Chapman. He's going to make him work to keep that starting spot. He's a run stuffer a lot like Chapman is. He's not quite as big. He's not that 600-pound safe that the Colts coaches talked about Chapman being early on. But I think, with Chapman, his development kind of stalling a little bit. I think the injury just hurt him, and for him to not become the player, that elite nose tackle that the Colts thought he maybe could develop into. Perry's a guy who can come in and just keep him working, and he'll be a guy that rotates in and out at that nose tackle position, and that's good. It'll also allow guys like Zach Kerr and Montori Hughes to rotate more in and out at those defensive end and 3-tech defensive tackle spots, not force them into a nose tackle role that they're not necessarily quite suited for. So I think it's a good pick. They needed kind of that backup nose tackle to bring in, and getting one in the fifth round's never a bad thing. Stanford and Florida guys seem to be their MO so far.
Yes, so far. I know you're like me, Kyle. It doesn't matter how confused we are by the first pick or how the rest of the draft went. When the Sundays start rolling around here in September, we'll be front and center in the TV cheering them on. And if Phillip Dorsett scores an 80-yard touchdown on a bomb from Andrew Luck, it'll look like that first pick was all worth it. So we appreciate the time, Kyle. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Appreciate it.